Welcome, welcome, young lambs of Solaris 3. I, Acolyte Tomatoki, of the Order of the Deep, have been granted the honor of hosting this particular sermon, a tribute to our esteemed leader, Primus Fenrico. From days of humble to dawns of lordship, unto you shall I enlighten thy minds with the story of our leader, whom, to his last breaths, fought for Renacita's freedom from the heretic whispers of the Thenodian. Yet, his legacy, in our realm, is not just in his tale, for there is much more to his being that has graced our world. And thus, it is on this day, shall we know, truly know, of Primus Fenrico. Now, let us embark on the lesson. Without me talking like I got Fenrico's foot in my mouth, cause ain't no way am I talking like that for this whole thing. Are you mad? Some decades ago, Fenrico was once just your common acolyte who attended the Order's seminary before its destruction. According to a former classmate, even during this time, he had always been passionate about building an ideal dream world. It wasn't just an ambition he obtained after becoming Primus. Still, in time, around 20 years ago, Fenrico becomes Primus, and according to this same classmate, his face appeared to be shrouded by a strange shadow. Yeah, I'm thinking that's Leviathan's influence. Because remember, the divinity this order was praying to was actually the Thenodian disguised as the Sentinel. Thus, with Fenrico being the little head of this order, of course Leviathan's gonna want to get a little bit more intimate with him over everyone else. But we'll see more evidence of this later down. Still, what's interesting to note is that Fenrico was also aware that the Blessed Maiden, Fleur-de-Lis, was actually the Thenodian's resonator. But in order to lead the people to pursue a pure and united will, he kept this truth to himself and sought to cleanse all aftermaths of the Dark Tide. Admittedly, a key attribute of his whole character is desiring for a Renacita which is spiritually united. While she can absolutely draw parallels to Leviathan, considering its whole assimilation thing, I assure you there's a noble reason as to why he wants union so bad. Now, to keep up hiding with this truth about Fleur-de-Lis, he even labeled himself as the new Enlightened One, which was unprecedented from other Primuses. Now, I suspect why he wanted to cover up this fact is because if people knew the whole truth, that their entire doctrine was built upon the foundation of a Thenodian, yeah, the Order would collapse, Renacita would crack, and goodbye permanently Fenrico's dream. Now, following his ascension, he has the Order immediately restricting the festivities of the Carnival, as well as temporarily discontinuing the Pilgrim's Sale, this really honorable event for acolytes, all as a means to have the public mourning for the Holy Maiden who had passed on, quote unquote. But honestly, the Carnival has never been the same since. To quote a poet named Sika, ever since the current Primus took over the Order, many plays have been banned. All performances must be approved or else you risk being arrested. But then a decade after, let's just say Fenrico shifted the Order's direction, going to more extreme extents to impose his ideal of unity onto the city. This is namely seen when Fenrico orders a reinstatement of the tradition of the Pilgrim's Sale, but he repurposes it as an act of punishment for violators of doctrine rather than an honor of faith. And yes, everyone is susceptible to it, even his own acolytes. The sale enabled Fenrico to banish those he saw as a threat to the Order's goal of achieving unity, the fools as he calls them. After all, if these heathens blabbed, it could sow doubt into people's hearts, which in turn could violate Fenrico's vision. Although, perhaps banishment isn't the right word. It's more like a death sentence, because the sale will take the fools to penitence end, a once sacred area now corrupted by the Dark Tide, and thus is rampant with tacit discords, rogue echoes, and worst of all, the Dragon of Dirge. Good luck surviving all of that! Still, as is atypical of Fenrico to hide the facts, he frames the sale as being a means for the fools to be absolved of all transgressions and granted the Sentinels forgiveness. Sure, they can be absolved in hell! Now, it's also in the same decade where during another one of their annual carnivals, it's actually brought to ruin as a monstrous sea beast, rogue echoes, and tacit discords sweep through the festival. Seeing this as divine punishment, Fenrico thus bans the event for the next 10 years. So yes, Wuthering Waves 2.0 is the little first time the carnival has happened since a whole decade. But not gonna lie, this sudden attack of echoes to incite fear into this festive event, it does feel crafted. Especially when you consider the events of Wuthering Waves 2.0, whereby there was indeed another potential attack happening at the Carnival. But as we know, the Fraxis were involved to make that happen, and these two have been indeed collaborating for some time. An organization that's for the Thenodian, working with an order that believes the Thenodian. Makes sense. Did you know that it's thanks to the Fraxidus that the Dragon of Dirge is as dangerous as it is? Formerly, it was Cardathea's friend, Gehenna, but thanks to the Fraxidus, it's now just some feral beast that attacks anything on sight. Now, during one of their negotiations, where we see him in talks with Fulova, she requests to have Leviathan's power. The thing is, separating Imperator's fused form to isolate Leviathan's power isn't easy considering how long they've been combined. And the only way to do so, in Fenrico's mind, is to deepen the people's beliefs. Whatever that means. Still, Fenrico will continue his pursuits of this, and in return, he'd like for Fulova to deal with the travelers from far and wide who are coming to Ragunna for their Grand Carnival. And these travelers, Fenrico fears, might destabilize Ragunna even more. So Villova complies, and thus the Carnival approaches. And coming into the Renacita story cinematic, we see, interestingly enough, the three groups that comprise of Raguna's major powers all in one room: the Phassalias, the Montellis, and the Order. The Phasalia and Montelli families are bickering about the appropriateness of holding the Carnival, but the two ultimately look to Fenrico for his final assessment. And thus, the Primus, much like the silver mask guy holding his hand up, makes the decision to allow the Carnival to be held. Also, it's here where we hear Fenrico's voice for the first time, and bruh, his voice acting is so good, be it in English or Japanese or any of the other languages, but I'm more familiar with English and Japanese. His voice acting is so good, I'll devote a section to it alone in this video. And thus, we come into Wuthering Waves 2.0. But before we jump in, when you look back on his time leading, indeed his sentiments during his first decade as Primus did seem nice, but then in the latter decade, it really made a whole 180. Weirdly bipolar. Man, Leviathan be trying to mind break everybody. Now honestly, we only get appearances from Fenrico until the last act. As the Carnival kicks off and people are vibing, Fenrico really be that strict parent that ruins the fun. A kind of party pooper. Because when he enters the scene and the Order's trumpets mute out the festive themes, Fenrico's just like, don't have too much fun, y'all. And everyone's just like, oh, really? And then when Brant comes in, yeah, his vibes are so bright, he even overshadows Fenrico. Literally, stay in your dark corner. But he doesn't stay away for too long, as when Cetus is about to strike out Raguna, Fenrico's just standing there like that father who's about to revel in the whole I told you so moment. But alas, the attack is thankfully thwarted, and the Carnival ends in success. So, fast forward, and Fenrico invites Rover over to the Cathedral of Mercury for a personal chat. Mind you, this is the first time the two have met. But surprisingly, Fenrico informs Rover that the Fool's Troop, Brant's crew, shall have permanent rights to perform within the city. Now for context, the Fool's Troop are majorly comprised of people who are rescued from the Pilgrim's Sail, and are thus technically all fools, hence the name, Fool's Troop. So obviously, to even allow these banished people back on Raguna grounds, wow. Nevertheless, Fenrico's justification is that since they've all technically gone through the pilgrimage successfully, by not dying, they have thus atoned for their transgressions. Fair enough. Now from here on, it's Rover's turn to ask all the questions. And it's here when Fenrico informs Rover of various things, namely on the wounded state of the Sentinel, the symbolic origins of the Dark Tide, and the fate of Fleur-de-Lis. But mind you, all that he says here is poppycock. Or most of it at least. My words are without deceit, head ass. Still, at least he does reveal to Rover that Fleur-de-Lis was someone that resonated with the Thenodian rather than Sentinel, which is half right, literally. And it's also through this fact that the world of Wuthering Waves is officially introduced to the concept of Thenodian resonators. So come on, Getulin, where the hell are you, mate? And then, that ends Fenrico's involvement in Wuthering Waves 2.0. Fenrico, once again in his attempt to achieve unity, cooks up a plot to draw favor from the people towards the Order by actually sowing fear across Raguna. Essentially, he purposely had his acolytes spreading a quote-unquote cursed melodic script written by the Poet Society, another group of blasphemous individuals who were banished in the past. He even got Cristoforo's help to really lay that fear on thick by having him conjuring demons whenever the piece was read or even talked about, thus enhancing the fear-mongering. That'll make the people even more fearful against the heretical, making them more prejudiced against them, and thus side with the Order even more. Hence, unity. But of course, that whole scheme fell through thanks to Rover and, I quote, that insignificant Torquato girl. Nah, Cristoforo here was just being salty because he didn't get to mindbreak Chacona back then. Well, regardless of the L, Enrico doesn't seem to mind, nor does he care for the morality of his plan. I mean, dude was really trying to scare people on purpose, again. But to him, fear's just a tool. One of many tools that'll help him control Raguna's order and chaos. The only thing he actually cares about. He wants order to stave chaos, but he'll create chaos if it will maintain order. But what's interesting is that, albeit his majorly calm demeanor, in this patch, Cristoforo picks up on how restless he is. I mean, surely it couldn't be Rover or Chacona bothering him, so perhaps there's something else he seeks. To which Fenrico says, hey yo, you're getting too nosy. But he says that in a very professional manner. Kind of like in your corporate emails when you translate, I hope your day is ruined, to kind regards. But then, Fenrico questions Cristoforo's entire involvement in his order to begin with, considering it was him that played a primary role in the Poet Society's whole turnaround. Because in the past, Cristoforo was the one that handed one of their members a particular lithograph, and it was this item that ultimately turned them against the Order's doctrines. Doing this was clearly against Fenrico's interests, and yet here's Cristoforo helping Fenrico's interests? Dude, what are you doing? But alas, Cristoforo too replies in the same way that Fenrico did. Touché. And finally, Cristoforo forebodingly asks, how long has it been since you last dreamed of your true divinity? Now, as we've suspected since his past, Fenrico is another victim to Leviathan. But after 2.2, when Rover was able to technically kill the Thenodian, it would explain why Fenrico doesn't hear it no more, at least for now. Maybe that's why he was so bothered? Or maybe he was so bothered because he was so keen to fulfill his plan, a plan he's about to realize in Wuthering Waves 2.5. Now, prior to the events of Wuthering Waves 2.5, Fenrico records two rather interesting entries. Both outline a particular plan that he has in the works, but their intentions with it are at an odds. In the first record, Fenrico outlines how, upon reclaiming the divine power, he will bring it to the paradise, where the consciousnesses of the people shall dwell. And when the divinity returns, it shall be the day they walk towards unity and light once more. Alright, without context, sounds kinda neat. But we all know the divinity here he is referring to is Leviathan, so yeah, that actually isn't sounding so good. Now, as for the second record, Fenrico outlines how, once he strikes down a particular harbinger, he will use the divinity's power to merge all the trapped souls into his own body, then lead them all away from the dark tide by starting a new sanctuary, another paradise. And in here, when tens of thousands of restored spirits unite as one to form a fortress of unshaken faith, it will cease to exist. It being the Thenodian. Because after all, Thenodians are literally born from the fears of human existence. So if society can truly have no fear, then technically it shall cease to exist too. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is the true essence as to why Fenrico, since the jump, has always wanted to unify Rena Sita. It wasn't about gathering everyone under one corruptive rule. No, it was to unify the minds, have everyone be of one spirit, the spirit of no fear. And thus with this, no Thenodian. That really appeared to be Fenrico's ultimate goal. But now that I've laid out the two recordings, notice the difference between them? One plan, he wants to join the people with Leviathan. Another plan, he wants to join the people away from Leviathan. So what's going on with him? Wasn't the Thenodian dead? Well, it's very likely that Leviathan's influence is back. Because if you remember from Wuthering Waves 2.4, Christopher kind of brought that thing back. And now it's at Fenrico again, essentially birthing a split personality within him. And we know it's some kind of separate consciousness because in the second recording, Fenrico outlines why is it that he sometimes forgets things. It's as if he blacks out when Leviathan takes control, hence split personalities. Well, even if there's two versions of him inside right now, he still has a plan to fulfill and thus he'll need to get his equipment. Or, you know, steal it from someone else. Hello, Fulova. Because Fulova, for her own plans, needs a Thenodian gem, the divinity's power, to create a Sonorosphere that can house the rebirth souls of her deceased people, the paradise. And these components also happen to be exactly what Fenrico needs. Thus, run them pockets. But he's got to time it first. And thus he awaits for Fulova to actually manifest it before getting the jump. Make her do all the work and reap the rewards. So, as the time approaches, Fenrico is seen in another recording with another acolyte. The acolyte here reports on Fulova reaching the final stage of her plan, and Fenrico's already robbed her stuff in his mind because he mentions how the foundation of the paradise is now complete. But alas, whilst he continues to highlight his plan, the acolyte looks at him confused, because everything he is saying right now is completely different to what he was told before. Hell, Fenrico doesn't even remember this conversation being recorded, hence more evidence of two minds dwelling in Fenrico right now. Though I suspect here, it's the Thenodian talking, because the normal Fenrico appears to be consciously making an effort to record everything in case his amnesia moments happen again. Well, regardless of this, both Fenricos can at least agree that the Fraxidus are not needed anymore. And so, the day in the Fabricatorium comes, the Fabricatorium being an underwater laboratory built by a joint effort between the Order and the Fraxidus, and Fulova, for the first time, manifests her lost beyond. Get her! But Fenrico doesn't rob her personally, he gets his posse to do it. Unfortunately for him, Fulova was able to seal away everything, including the gem, and even made her escape. Thus, Fenrico's acolytes continue their pursuit of her and the gem. Whilst Fenrico, yes, he's on his way, because he'll personally see to his goal being realized. And on his way to the Fabricatorium, oh hello Rover, nice peasant boat, Fenrico invites Rover aboard, and here, their second heart-to-heart happens. Haven't had a moment like this since 2.0, mind you. Rover reveals that he killed his god, which unsurprisingly gets Fenrico a little tilted. Or is that Leviathan actually getting tilted because it recently lost to Rover? Nevertheless, he still has his ambitions of wanting to unify and purify Rena Sita. Although if you notice, when he's mentioning how their grace and divine will shine upon us once more, the skies got darker? Hey yo, show don't tell! Now in revealing some its and bits of his plan, he also offers to rid of the Fraxidus, should Rover choose to cooperate with him. Although to be fair, he's already been in the process of doing that, but it'll help way more if he had the laureate on his side. But unfortunately, Rover politely rejects him by making a snide little jest at his broken cooperation with the Fraxidus due to failed negotiations on how to split Leviathan's energy. And in response... And then Fenrico's like, oh, so you want to drop my trust? How about I drop this bomb-ass tsunami on your laureate ass? And so, in essentially flushing Rover down into the depths, Fenrico continues to make his way over to the Fabricatorium. Also, you'll notice, right, that Thenodian corruption under his mask? Considering he's been adorning that thing since, likely before even Wuthering Waves 2.0, yeah, he's been hearing the Thenodian's whispers for quite a while. Now, much later down the quest, Fenrico is successful in obtaining the gem, but Fulova and Rover are successful in reaching him, and thus we enter into the finale. Fenrico's on his godly BS, drawing the gem's power to trigger the Dark Tide, and when you watch it, oh yeah, it's Leviathan Fenrico that's fully at it, because look at how he moves, it's as if his body is possessed. And so as the Dark Tide's Tacit Discords are summoned, Rover realizes that Fenrico himself is the Harbinger. Remember Fenrico's second recording? This Harbinger would be someone among the faithful, and they would bring both life and annihilation from the Dark Tide. Too bad that someone was himself. The Tacit Discord summon do not keep Rover and Frolova at bay for very long though, and eventually they're only paces away from Fenrico, who's now not only fully harnessing the gem's power, but is now clearly sounding a lot more like a Leviathan. I mean, we can literally see the two souls of Fenrico inside the one body, and so Fenrico decides to take to the fight into his own hands. After all, if you want a job done right, you do it yourself. Big emphasis on if though, because Fenrico himself is still unable to thwart off Rover and Fulova. After an epic fight, ultimately Fenrico is brought down by Rover's Getsuga Tensho, and off comes the mask to reveal the literal site of Fenrico's corruption, something he's probably had to hide for a very long time. In recognizing that Fenrico truly isn't himself right now, Rover tries getting him to realize he's a puppet to the Thenodian, but Fenrico doesn't give up and continues to pour in denizens from the Dark Tide. But suddenly, Napoli II's lantern, the previous Primus, who used this relic born from the Sentinel themselves to fend off the Dark Tide's first attack, activates upon contact with the Dark Tide, and the world stops as the normal Fenrico is brought back into consciousness, likely thanks to the lantern dispelling Leviathan's influence. Here, Fenrico reflects on the teachings of his predecessors, likely realizing he has twisted them thanks to the Leviathan's influence. Furthermore, he also reflects on the second of Fulova's prophecy: the path born of injustice must be fortified with further transgressions. And I suspect it's here where he thinks to himself, ah shucks, I made it come true. And thus, in his last moments to redeem his many transgressions, Fenrico uses all of his strength to power Napoli's lantern and completely dispel the Dark Tide, whilst placing his hopes on Rover to save Rina Sita. Yeah, your hopes were misplaced, Fenrico, because our boy just lost the Thenodian gem to the Fraxidus. Still, not to worry, there's 2.6 coming up. But for now, it's time for our last moments with Fenrico. The Primus, much like Cardathea, decides to stay in the Fabricatorium to stem the Dark Tide spread, likely via the lifelong use of Napoli's lantern. He also realizes how the Thenodian's activity is happening more in Septimont, and thus tasks Rover with heading over there to solve Rina Sita's crisis. Now what's interesting is that in Fenrico's second recording, he outlines how, should the path falter, remember, the lantern endures. It will guide you to the true light, which it literally did. It really led him towards the light, be it in death or clarity. And so, to wrap up his lore, I'd like to quote the description of his overlord Echo item. A despaired devotee, a fallen soul devoured by an illusory paradise. When the mask of Dark Tide was dropped, he found clarity at the end of his path, hope and redemption traded with a perished form. He will forever sleep at the bottom of the dark sea, for there too lies the way home. And thus ends the story of Fenrico. But I assure you the fandom isn't done with him. Dude's popular enough to be wanted as a playable character. So if he was playable, what would that look like? In terms of Sonata effect, very likely to be Aero. Unless they want to incorporate Napoli's lantern into the combat, then fine, he can be Spectro like Phoebe. But for the most part, very likely Aero. My evidence? Well, when you fight him in the story, you can hear him saying, "Hark, O breath of the winds, bow thee down and yield, ye lost souls." He is literally invoking the winds here, and Aero being his Sonata effect. Now, as for how he actually fights, let's look at his boss moveset. I think referencing this is a good start to theorize his kit if he were playable. After all, Cardathea's moveset also kinda comes from her boss moveset. Anyway, when you fight Fenrico, it's literally like the power of God in anime by his side. Bit cowardly. Because here he is, throwing at you Gehenna phantasms, freeze balls, and Phoebe lasers, but it's all behind a barrier. Now, translating that to a playable model, it'd probably be most fitting if Fenrico were a rectifier. But honestly, any weapon could work. If he were a sword or broadsword user, I suspect he'd fight like Jinzi, whereby he'd just swing that thing around without his hands. And if he were a gauntlet or gun user, I'd just actually laugh. Could you imagine Fenrico throwing hands? Or Fenrico being equipped with a Glock? For the memes, maybe Kuro Games should give him these weapons. Now eventually, if you hurt him enough, he'll summon a fence which summons Tacit Discords inside, before eventually erupting a Dark Tide Spirit Bomb. And these two phases could totally work as a two-phase Resonance Liberation. So indeed, a playable Fenrico would be gas. But if the WooWat dev team struggles with creating a playable version, I assure you, if there's something they won't struggle with, it's the voice acting. Because Fenrico's voice performance is too good. Now, whilst I play in English, I also absolutely appreciate the Japanese voice acting too. Still, I bet no matter the language, Fenrico sounds awesome in all. But gosh, special shoutouts to both Rich Keeble and Ishikawa Hideo, the voice actors of Fenrico for English and Japanese respectively. Rich, you may know him as Monoko from the absolute gem that is Expedition 33, and Ishikawa-san, you may know him as Itachi from Naruto. Nevertheless, both possess powerful, imposing voices, and thus are absolutely perfect for Fenrico, so big props to the voice acting crew for picking the perfect talents. I think back and I remember when I heard Fenrico for the first time, and I was like, holy gosh, this cannot be a normal character, because that's a voice that only belongs to people of strong significance. It's the voice that's got the kind of tenor and reverberations of aura. Like, it's the kind of voice that feels appropriate to bow down towards. And from then on, every time Fenrico was on screen, my ears were just ready to drink up that oral wine. Because there was truly something about their performance which just felt so unlike any other character. Maybe I'm just a sucker for deep, mature, powerful voice acting, I don't know. But you cannot deny the voice acting of Fenrico, much like his title, was truly prime. Still, outside his stellar performance, there's actually another reason as to why Fenrico is a bit of a niche celebrity in the woo-wah space. The memes. I'd say his meme reputation is way more prevalent in the Japanese space, but still, he's definitely a part of woo-wah's meme culture now. And we know how powerful that can be. The chameleon mascot, thanks to memes, is now a legitimate icon who could rival even the likes of EOS, Era of Solon. And Fenrico could also now count himself amongst the mighty too. Now, if you just type in Fenrico's katakana into Twitter, you're gonna have a fun time doom scrolling, because the Japanese players are locked in with memes on this guy. But if there's any meme in particular that comes to mind from my knowledge, it's the Porsche meme. Because I think on global, that's the meme we all know. Now, the Fenrico Porsche meme comes from the misheard lyrics of his boss music, because as it starts, it sounds like the singer is saying something about Fenrico's Porsche arriving, salvation, ascension, and 338 liters of horsepower. But alas, the internet cannot take all the credit for the memes, because I'd say that even the woo-wah devs have fun with him too. There's this funny achievement called Lashes of Atonement, whereby if you defeat Fenrico a total of 50 times, you get it. And that's just funny to me. Alright, guess that's a wrap on Fenrico, y'all. Anyway, this has been your boy Tomotoki on this little tribute to our Primus Fenrico. Let me know your thoughts on the character in the comments below. Follow my socials if you want to keep up with your boy. And like and subscribe if you want more from your boy. Much love, and take care.